The missile alert shrieked through Captain Gianna Thompson's cockpit as two enemy fighters locked onto her tail, her F-35's warning suite flashing like a holiday display, while four fast-closing bogies fired in unison, leaving her outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and, by every tactical guideline, already dead. "Falcon 2, you're defensive! Break right!" her wingman shouted, his voice cracking as the first missile ripped past her canopy close enough for her to see its exhaust spiral away, the second detonating so near that fragments rattled against her jet's skin and triggered a chain of blinking cautions across her screens. She should have punched out, instincts begging her to pull the ejection handle and leave the dying aircraft behind, yet she grinned instead. Because Gianna Thompson had waited her whole life for someone to underestimate her this badly. The enemy pilots thought she was finished. Command treated her like a fluke who got lucky in simulators, and her own squadron still muttered "diversity hire" behind her back, thinking she didn't catch it, but they were all seconds away from learning the same brutal lesson. What unfolded in the next 47 minutes would tear apart the rulebook of modern air combat. How one pilot flipped the script from prey to predator, turning a no-survival scenario into the most decisive solo air victory of the era, dropping 8 hostile fighters using methods no manual endorsed, but that worked because she understood what her opponents didn't. But before showing how she pulled off the impossible, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and hit subscribe, because this story proves that the pilot everyone doubts is usually the one you should fear most. The briefing room at Al Dhafra Air Base vibrated with tension as Colonel Marcus Hayes pointed to satellite images revealing a nightmare battle space. 12 of the Air Force's top aviators studying the intel with growing unease, while Hayes laid it out plainly. Enemy forces had deployed their elite squadron, graduates of their Top Gun equivalent flying Su-57s packed with avionics and weapons meant to match or beat U.S. systems. Major Derek Blade Carlson, the squadron's star with 17 air-to-air kills, leaned back smugly, insisting that Russian tech couldn't match F-35 superiority, only for Hayes to snap that such arrogance would get someone killed, reminding them that the enemy had trained specifically to counter U.S. tactics and had studied every American engagement for a decade. In the back row, Captain Gianna Thompson absorbed it all, the lone woman, the newest pilot, and painfully aware that most in the room doubted she belonged. She heard the whispers, caught the eye rolls, felt the subtle walls closing whenever she entered. "Thompson," Hayes barked, pulling her attention back. "You're flying Carlson's wing tomorrow. Stick to his 6, follow his lead, and don't try to be a hero, because those enemy pilots will tear you apart if you break formation." "Yes, sir," she answered evenly, swallowing the condescension. Afterward, she walked to the hangar where her F-35, Tail 327 call sign Falcon 2, waited in its shelter, her hand trailing across the jet's surface as she checked panels with a personal ritual that went beyond checklists. "Talking to your plane again. Diversity," someone muttered behind her, the familiar insult floating through the air like static she'd long stopped reacting to. But that didn't mean she ever stopped hearing it. She turned to see Captain Brad Viper Morrison smirking at her, the nickname Diversity Hire clinging to her since day one, a constant reminder that half the squadron believed she'd only passed training because someone upstairs wanted better statistics. "Just making sure she's ready," Gianna answered coolly. "You should try it sometime instead of assuming your ground crew is flawless." "Whatever. Just try not to get Blade killed tomorrow when you freeze up under fire. Some of us actually belong in these cockpits," he said before walking off, leaving her in the dim glow of the shelter, returning her focus to her aircraft like he hadn't spoken at all. What none of them realized, what her classified record hid better than any firewall, was that Gianna Thompson had more real combat hours than the rest of Falcon Flight combined. Missions flown in airspace that officially didn't exist, against enemies whose governments denied they'd ever engaged her. She'd racked up kills that would never appear on any scoreboard, and she'd requested this transfer because she'd heard this squadron was the best, a place where she could sharpen her edge against the sharpest talent in the service. Instead, she'd found a boys' club where swagger counted more than skill, and where her abilities were judged by gender before performance. Tomorrow's mission would change all of that. She could feel it in her bones. At dawn, 6 F-35s launched through pre-sunrise darkness, climbing through layered clouds toward their patrol sector. Gianna held the number 2 slot, glued perfectly to Carlson's wing, while the other 4 jets fanned into supporting positions. "Falcon Flight, this is Overlord," the AWACS controller crackled. "Radar contacts bearing 030, range 100 miles, multiple bogies, at least 6 targets vectoring to intercept, weapons tight until they cross the boundary." "Copy, Overlord," Carlson replied. "Falcon Flight, arm weapons, and maintain formation. Let's show these guys how we do business." Their sensors picked up the enemy long before visual range. 6 Su-57s in a confident, predatory spread. "They see us," Gianna reported, watching the shifting returns. "They're maneuvering to engage." "Stay tight, Falcon 2, Carlson ordered. "We go in as a team. We leave as a team. Standard BVR engagement. Fox 3 on my mark." But something felt wrong. A deep instinct carved from real missions she wasn't allowed to admit she'd flown. The enemy formation felt too casual, too composed, like they were waiting for a cue. "Falcon lead. I'm getting strange radar returns. Possible stealth contacts bearing." "Falcon 2. Maintain radio discipline." Carlson cut her off. "Stay focused on the targets we can see." "Falcon Flight. Fox 3. Fox 3. 6 AIM-120s streaked ahead at Mach 4, and then the entire tactical picture detonated into chaos. 4 more Su-57s materialized on radar, running passive the whole time, invisible until the Americans committed. It was a trap. "Break! Break! Break!" someone yelled as the hidden enemy launched their own volley. The sky turned into a cage of missile trails and jamming noise as the formation shattered. Gianna broke left, her threat warning howling as 2 missiles chased her. She dumped chaff and flares while pulling 9 Gs, her G-suit squeezing hard to keep her conscious. The first missile took the chaff, exploding behind her, but the second stayed hungry. Through the storm of comms, she heard her squadron falling apart. Carlson tangled with 3 fighters, Morrison calling defensive, 1 jet trailing smoke after a hit. The clean formation dissolved into a deadly furball where only raw skill mattered. The second missile was still driving in. Gianna rolled inverted, bleeding altitude as she traded altitude for survival, then dumped flares at the last instant and forced the F-35 through a turn at the edge of its structural tolerance. The missile overshot, exploding close enough to pepper her jet with fragments, but not enough to take her out. "Fal 2 is defensive," she transmitted, more for AWACS records than anyone else, because defensive was exactly where she wanted to be. 2 Su-57s dropped onto her position, certain they had an easy kill, probably already thinking about the bragging rights. She watched them approach, calculating geometry, timing, energy states in the quiet, lethal part of her mind built for this. She let them close, closer, closer still, waiting for their weapons envelopes to bloom. When the first fighter fired his cannon, she was already ahead of him, snapping the jet into a flat scissors that flipped the engagement in seconds. Now she was on his tail, her reticle drifting over the target like fate itself lining up the shot. She squeezed the trigger, feeling the sharp thump of an AIM-9X leaving the rail before the missile tore through the short distance and turned the Su-57 into a rolling fireball she flew straight through, bursting out the other side to see the second fighter panicking and trying to run. "Fox 2, Splash 1, she reported with steady calm, as if she hadn't just executed a maneuver that would make half the instructor corps question physics. The second Su-57 pilot actually knew what he was doing. She'd give him that. Immediately going defensive with ruthless G-pulls and a storm of countermeasures. But Gianna had been fighting better pilots in worse conditions for years, long before she ever touched an F-35 with its sensor fusion and targeting edge. She stayed patient, shadowing him through every roll and break, waiting for the inevitable human mistake. And when he climbed to try baiting her into an energy trap, she took the shot without hesitation. Another AIM-9X, another brilliant explosion. "Fox 2, Splash 2, she announced. "Falcon 2 is back in the fight." That's when Carlson's voice broke through, strained with crushing G-forces. I'm hit, ejecting," and she snapped her head across the battle space, spotting the smoke trail spiraling toward the desert floor before his chute deployed. With him out, command of the flight fell to whoever stepped up. "Falcon Flight, this is Falcon 2. She transmitted with the tone of someone who'd done this in real war zones. "Reform on me. Defensive posture. We're fighting our way out systematically." "Negative, Falcon 2, Morrison barked. "We're bugging out. Fight's over." "Belay that," she snapped back. "We've got a pilot on the ground and 6 enemy fighters between us and safety. We fight through or we die. Your choice, Viper." She didn't wait for him. 3 enemy fighters were already diving toward Carlson's position, probably calling ground teams to capture him. Gianna shoved her throttles forward and went supersonic, arrowing straight at them. The lead Su-57 never knew she was there, her radar set to low probability of intercept, her stealth making her nearly invisible until she fired. Fox 3, she sent an AIM-120 from 30 miles, slamming the fighter out of the sky before it could react. "Splash 3, she said, already braking toward the next threat. The remaining 2 finally realized the Predator had flipped sides. They split, standard doctrine meant to divide her attention. But Gianna had trained for multi-target chaos in programs nobody in her squadron even knew existed. She locked the closer fighter with another AIM-120 and immediately swapped to the cannon, hosing rounds toward the second as both enemies tried to claw away from her. The missile shredded the first jet's wing and sent it spiraling into the ground, while her cannon fire stitched across the second fighter until something vital detonated and it disintegrated mid-air. "Splash 4 and 5, she called, steady as ever despite her pulse pounding near 180. "Carlson's position is clear. Falcon 3, you're closest. Hold a combat air patrol until SAR arrives." "Roger that," someone replied, finally trusting her lead. But they weren't done. 3 more Su-57s were inbound, and AWACS was warning of additional launches from the enemy base. "Falcon 2, Overlord advised, you are heavily outnumbered. Recommend immediate egress." Gianna checked her fuel, weapons, systems, still green across the board. She'd fired 4 missiles and some cannon, but she still had bite. And more importantly, she understood their doctrine. She knew Russian tactics better than they knew her name. "Overlord Falcon 2, negative egress. I'm keeping them busy while Falcon Flight escapes. Falcon 2, do not engage. You are 1 aircraft against 3+ reinforcements." "Understood." Falcon 2 engaging. She clicked her radio off before AWACS could object again, rolled inverted and dove hard, pushing to military power as she planned the next phase. The 3 Su-57s took the bait, dropping after her with the confidence of hunters chasing wounded prey. What they didn't know was that low altitude, high speed, and radar clutter made up the environment she dominated. She'd run nap of the Earth missions through mountain ravines and dense urban skylines while hostile radars hunted her. Compared to that, the desert was easy. She leveled at 500 feet, slicing over dunes so fast the ground blurred, and the enemy spread wide to box her in, doing exactly what doctrine told them to do in a 3-on-1. They thought they had her cornered. They were wrong. Gianna waited until they were fully committed, until their geometry locked them into the trap they thought they'd set for her. Only then did she yank the jet vertically, slamming into full afterburner and rocketing skyward, leaving the desert behind in seconds as their targeting systems scrambled to keep up. 3 seconds of confusion for them, 3 seconds of opportunity for her. At the top of the climb, she rolled inverted, locked onto the trailing Su-57 and fired Fox 2, an AM-9X at point-blank kinematic range, the seeker head tracking the heat signature flawlessly before the warhead detonated close enough to shred the fighter's control surfaces into confetti. "Splash 6, she called, already diving back toward the deck and letting gravity refill the energy she'd spent. The remaining 2 fighters went for a bracket, one dropping low, the other staying high, trying to trap her between overlapping weapons envelopes, textbook Russian doctrine. Gianna broke the bracket by doing something no textbook endorsed. She pointed her nose directly at the lower fighter and charged him head-on at a combined closure rate of more than 1,400 mm. They played chicken for 3 endless seconds until his nerve cracked and he broke left, exposing his profile. Gianna raked him with cannon fire as they flashed past canopy to canopy, close enough that she caught the glint of his helmet. "Splash 7, she reported, yanking her jet clear of the debris field, 1 left. The final Su-57 pilot was either fearless or foolish. She couldn't tell which, because instead of running, he turned into her, accepting a 1-on-1 duel even after watching her dismantle his entire squadron. Maybe he believed he was the ace who could end her streak. Maybe pride outweighed survival. Maybe he'd rather die fighting than flee alone. It didn't matter. They merged at high speed, passing so close that Gianna could see his eyes behind the visor. And then the real knife fight began. A savage, twisting, high-G duel where every decision carried life or death consequences. He was skilled, far better than the rest, matching her turn for turn, denying shooting windows, fighting with a precision that forced her to dig deeper with every maneuver. They bled altitude together, spiraling from 20,000 feet down to 10, then to 5, then so low she could make out individual dunes racing under her wings. Her G-suit pumped furiously, her breathing controlled through clenched teeth, sweat streaking down her face inside the helmet. This was pure instinctive flying, the realm where great pilots separate themselves from merely good ones. She tried a high yo-yo, he countered. A barrel roll attack, he predicted. Every standard move she attempted, he had an answer ready. He'd studied American tactics as deeply as she'd studied Russian doctrine, so she stopped using American tactics. Instead, she executed a maneuver she'd learned from an Israeli instructor in a classified exchange program, a hybrid move no U.S. manual documented. She rolled inverted, pulled through while cutting throttle, then reignited full afterburner mid-roll as she came upright again, creating a moment where her energy signature looked like a collapsing mistake. The enemy pilot took the bait, pulling hard to exploit what he thought was her stall. But she was already recovering, already ahead, and suddenly his aircraft slid into her sights. Final aim 9x. No hesitation. The missile locked instantly and struck true, turning the last Su-57 into a spectacular fireball that lit the desert horizon. Splash 8, Gianna transmitted, her voice strained but steady. Falcon 2 is Winchester, returning to base. The radio exploded with chatter. AWACS verifying kills. Squadron mates stunned into disbelief. Command demanding immediate debrief. But she ignored almost all of it, putting her full attention into bringing her battle-scarred jet home. The engagement had lasted 47 minutes from first shot to last, and she'd just accomplished something air combat analysts would be dissecting for decades. 8 enemy fighters downed single-handedly in a scenario that should have been unwinnable. When she touched down at Al Dhafra, the entire base seemed to be crowding the flight line. Ground crews stared, pilots gathered in stunned clusters. Senior officers hurried toward her shelter as she taxied in. She powered down the jet, ran her post-flight checklist with the same disciplined precision she brought to everything, and popped the canopy. The afternoon desert heat slammed into her, but it couldn't compare to the weight of the hundreds of eyes fixed on her as she climbed out. She removed her helmet, sweat plastering her short regulation haircut to her head, and Colonel Hayes reached her first, his face impossible to read. "Captain Thompson, report to my office immediately for debriefing. Do not speak to anyone until we have reviewed your gun camera footage and system data." "Yes, sir," she answered, steady despite the exhaustion grinding at her muscles. On her way to the operations building, she passed Morrison, who stared at her like she was an apparition. The trademark smirk was gone, replaced by something halfway between respect and fear, and she walked right past without caring which it was. The debrief lasted 6 hours. They reviewed every second, every maneuver, every decision, every weapons employment. Pentagon brass joined via secure link. Intelligence officers probed for details on enemy tactics. Gianna stayed calm and precise throughout. Yes, she'd engaged against orders. Yes, she'd taken risks. Yes, her maneuvers weren't in the playbook. And yes, she had single-handedly wiped out an enemy squadron that had been dominating the region for months. When the others were finally dismissed, Hayes shut the office door, leaving only the two of them. "I owe you an apology," he said immediately. "I underestimated you. I let my biases dictate my judgment. That was wrong." "Yes, sir, it was," she replied bluntly, too drained to soften the truth. Hayes actually cracked a small smile. "I've been reading your real service record, the classified one that required calling the Pentagon's Director of Operations to unlock. You've been flying real combat for 8 years, denied airspace, peer adversaries, 43 confirmed kills that will never appear in public. You're not a diversity hire. You're one of the most seasoned combat pilots in the entire Air Force. I never claimed I was just a diversity hire, sir. Other people did." "Fair enough." He leaned back. "So why are you here? Why volunteer for a standard squadron when you could have stayed with elite units that actually value pilots like you?" Gianna weighed her words. "Because I got tired of being a ghost, sir. I wanted to fly with regular units, prove I belonged, show that being a woman didn't make me less capable. I thought—" She paused, then finished quietly. "I thought proving myself here might open doors for other women who want to do this job." Hayes nodded. "Well, you've more than proven yourself. The gun camera footage will be classified, but the fact that you downed 8 enemy fighters alone is going to leak. You're about to be famous whether you want that or not. I just want to keep flying, sir, and you will. But everything is going to change. The Air Force will want you as an instructor, a mentor, maybe even a test pilot for next-gen platforms. You've demonstrated abilities very few aviators ever show. Over the next few days, Gianna watched her world shift. The same squadron that once excluded her now fought to stand next to her. Pilots who'd mocked her now hung on every word she said in briefings. Morrison even offered an apology, though Gianna suspected it had more to do with protecting his career than any genuine remorse. Carlson, recovered from his ejection with little more than bruised pride, pulled her aside after a briefing, looking like a man preparing to swallow barbed wire. "I need to say something," he began, awkward and stiff. "I was wrong about you. I thought... Well, it doesn't matter what I thought. You saved my life. You saved all our lives. And you did it with flying skills I didn't even think were possible. Thank you." "You would have done the same," Gianna replied, though they both knew that was optimistic at best. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I will now. You earned that." The official after-action report praised her exceptional airmanship and tactical innovation under unprecedented combat conditions. The unofficial report, the one circulating quietly through fighter pilot channels, destined for every weapons school syllabus, broke down her engagement step by step, analyzing how she'd turned impossible odds into a decisive kill count. But the biggest change came from higher up. The Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force himself called her, offering a position as an instructor at the weapons school, where she'd train the next generation in the skills and instincts that had kept her alive through dozens of missions. "We need pilots like you teaching," he told her, "not just for the flying ability, but the mindset. Your calm under pressure, your speed of decision-making, your ability to spot opportunities others miss. Will you accept?" Gianna thought for 3 seconds. "Yes, sir, on one condition." "Name it." "I still fly combat missions when needed. I'm not ready to be just an instructor." The Vice Chief smiled. "I think we can arrange that, Captain Thompson. Or rather, Major Thompson. Your promotion just came through." 6 months later, Gianna stood before a class of advanced fighter pilots at Nellis, the best of the best, chosen for their skill and potential. They watched her with respect, curiosity, and just a hint of awe. "Good morning," she began. "I'm Major Gianna Thompson, and I'm going to teach you how to survive and win against peer adversaries. Some of you have heard stories. Some of them are even true. But listen closely. I'm not special because I'm a woman in a fighter jet. I'm not special because I shot down 8 enemy aircraft in one engagement. I'm special because I never stopped learning, never stopped improving, and never let anyone else's expectations set my limits." She clicked to the first slide, gun camera footage from that brutal desert fight. "Let's talk about what really happened that day and what you can take from it. Because the day you stop learning is the day you become predictable, and predictable pilots die." As she taught, Gianna realized she was exactly where she belonged, not struggling to earn respect from people who would never give it, but passing on knowledge that would save lives, shaping a generation that judged by merit, not stereotypes. The day's lessons spanned everything from fundamentals of BFM to complex, multi-bandit engagements. Gianna shared the mistakes she'd made, the tactics that worked, the ones that almost got her killed. Her students absorbed everything, pushing back with tough questions, sharpening their own instincts. During a break, a young female lieutenant approached, clearly nervous. "Ma'am, can I ask something personal?" "Go ahead." "How did you deal with when people didn't take you seriously, when they thought you didn't belong? How did you handle that without letting it affect your performance?" Gianna smiled, remembering exactly how that felt. "I used it as fuel," she said simply. "Every time someone doubted me, every time someone made a comment about diversity hires or questioned whether I could hack it, I let it push me to be better. Not to prove them wrong, their opinions never mattered, but to prove to myself that I could meet the standard I set for me. And if they still don't respect you after that, that's their problem, not yours. You can't control what people say or think. You control your actions, your skill, your professionalism. Focus on being the best pilot you can be. The right people will notice. The ones who don't, they're not worth your energy." The lieutenant nodded, visibly absorbing every word. "Thank you, ma'am. I needed that." As she walked off, Gianna found herself reflecting on the long, brutal road that had brought her here. From classified missions no one would ever read about, to a squadron that didn't want her, to the engagement that had rewritten everything. She'd gone from being dismissed and underestimated to being recognized as one of the Air Force's premier combat pilots. But the real victory wasn't the 8 kills, the promotion, or the overdue respect. It was knowing she'd forced the door wider for every woman coming after her, reducing the doubts, the stereotypes, the whispered assumptions that they couldn't hack it. She'd changed the conversation not through speeches or demands, but through unmistakable performance when it counted. That evening, in her quarters, she reviewed training footage. Her students were good, some frighteningly good. A few would surpass her someday, and that truth made her smile. That was the purpose of teaching, building the next generation to be even better than the last. Her phone buzzed. Colonel Hayes. "Intelligence confirms the enemy nation stood down its elite fighter squadron. Too many losses, including the 8 you took out. Whatever you did out there, it worked. Well done, Major." Gianna typed a short acknowledgement, set the phone aside, and let the weight of the day settle. The mission was over, the battle won. But the real work, the work of shifting a culture, of proving that capability had no gender, of shaping the future of the Air Force, continued every day. Her gaze drifted to a photo on her desk. Her younger self after her first solo flight, idealistic and full of dreams about serving her country in a fighter cockpit. That version of her would have been proud, not because of the kills or the accolades, but because she'd stayed true to her principles while adapting to a world that hadn't always welcomed her. Tomorrow she'd be back in the classroom, teaching the next group how to survive and win in the sky. She'd mentor anyone who wanted to learn, pass on the knowledge earned the hard way, and continue building a legacy that went far beyond her own record. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not the individual victories, but the lasting impact. Not the 8 fighters she shot down, but the hundreds of pilots she would train who'd defend their nation, using skills and mindset she'd given them. Major Gianna Thompson had proven she was one of the best fighter pilots alive. Now she was determined to make sure she wouldn't be the last. The wolf didn't need to announce itself. Its record spoke for it. And in the skies where life and death balanced on milliseconds, that record would echo for generations. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories every day.